They thought the war was their only enemy. But deep in the Philippine jungle, US soldiers discovered something the bullets in their rifles could not stop. The villagers had warned them, "Don't go into the trees at night, don't listen to the voices, and never ignore the salt," but they laughed. Until the darkness laughed back. What hunted them wasn't human. It was something older, hungrier, and far more patient. That was the night the soldiers learned the name whispered only in fear. The Aswang. The year was 1945, the final stretch of World War II in the Pacific. For months, the US Army had been moving across the islands, pushing back the last remnants of Japanese forces. The fighting had been brutal. Jungle ambushes, diseases, starvation. But the squad assigned to a remote outpost deep in the Philippine jungle believed the worst of the war was nearly over. All they had to do was hold the line, monitor the area, and report any enemy movements. It sounded simple, almost boring compared to the battles they had already survived. The squad, 12 men in total, arrived in a small, isolated village tucked between the mountains and the jungle. The place looked almost abandoned. Only a handful of villagers were there to greet them, and even they seemed uneasy, their eyes darting toward the tree line as though something lurked just beyond the shadows. The soldiers, tired and sweaty from the march, paid little attention. They were more interested in finding water, food, and a place to rest. But the unease became harder to ignore when one of the village elders stepped forward, a frail old woman wrapped in a faded shawl, her face marked by deep wrinkles. She didn't smile. Instead, she muttered a warning in Tagalog, the local language, which one of the squad's translators did his best to interpret. Her words chilled them even before he finished. She says, "We must not wander after dark." She says, "The jungle, it changes at night." She says the Aswang is watching. The men exchanged glances, some amused, others rolling their eyes. War-hardened soldiers weren't going to be frightened by ghost stories. They'd heard plenty of local superstitions in their time. Spirits, curses, witches, most of them chalked it up to folklore, ways for villagers to explain the dangers of the wild. Still, the old woman persisted. She pulled a small pouch from her clothing and pressed it into the hands of Private Harris, one of the younger soldiers. Inside was salt, rough, white grains that sparkled faintly in the light. She muttered something, her voice trembling. The translator explained softly. She says, "The salt will protect you. Keep it close. And whatever you do, don't sit, let it spill." Harris laughed nervously, holding the pouch like it was nothing more than a souvenir. The others chuckled too, teasing him about his magic powder. But the way the old woman looked at him, her eyes wide, her voice sharp as she repeated the warning, sent a quiet shiver down his spine. The squad set up camp in an abandoned hut near the edge of the jungle. As the sun sank behind the mountains, the entire village seemed to retreat indoors. Doors slammed shut, windows were covered, and not a single villager remained outside. It was as if the place had suddenly turned into a ghost town. The soldiers noticed. "Spooked bunch, aren't they?" Sergeant Miller muttered as he lit a cigarette. "Maybe they know something we don't," Harris said, half joking. But his eyes kept drifting to the pouch of salt on the table. Night fell quickly in the jungle. One moment the trees were glowing gold in the fading sun, and the next they were swallowed by an ocean of black. The sounds of the day, birds, insects, the distant chatter of villagers, vanished, replaced by a silence that pressed against their ears. Then faintly, it began. Click, click, click. A sound like fingernails tapping against wood echoed from the trees. Private Jenkins frowned and raised his rifle. "You hear that?" The others nodded. At first, they thought it might be an animal, maybe a bird, maybe the wind. But the sound grew louder, sharper, like something pacing back and forth just beyond the firelight. Then came another sound. Flutter? Not the flutter of a small bird. This was heavier, deeper, like wings far too large for the jungle. The men froze, gripping their rifles tighter. Harris whispered, "It sips probably nothing, just bats." But when they looked at each other, no one truly believed it. An hour later, the sound stopped. The jungle grew silent again, almost too silent, and eventually the squad forced themselves to relax. They made jokes, smoked, and tried to pretend the noise had been their imagination. But Harris couldn't stop staring at the pouch of salt. At some point during the night, it had tipped over, spilling half its contents onto the dirt floor. The grains scattered like tiny bones. He felt a sudden, unexplainable dread as he bent down to scoop it back into the pouch. Behind him, in the darkness outside, something was watching. He didn't see the two red eyes glowing faintly through the trees. The following morning, the soldiers woke up stiff, groggy, and uneasy. The night had been restless. Some swore they heard scratching on the walls. Others said they saw shadows moving between the trees. But daylight had a way of making everything feel less threatening. Sunlight spilled over the village, and the sounds of birds and insects returned. It almost made them laugh at their own nerves. Almost. The laughter ended when one of the villagers came running, screaming in Tagalog. He pulled Sergeant Miller and the translator toward the small chicken coop behind one of the huts. The other soldiers followed, curious until they saw it. The coop was in shambles. The wooden slats broken as if something had clawed its way inside. Feathers littered the ground, blood splattered the dirt, and several chickens lay dead, their bodies oddly untouched. No chewing, no tearing, just small, precise puncture marks in their necks. Every drop of blood had been drained. The old woman was there too. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She only stared at the dead chickens, then lifted her head toward the soldiers with a look that could freeze the air. She said one word, "Aswang." The translator hesitated, shifting uncomfortably before repeating it aloud. She says, "It was the Aswang." Private Jenkins laughed nervously. "Come on, it's Set's gotta be wild dogs, or maybe—" "No dog does this," another soldier interrupted, pointing at the corpses. "Look at Sit. It sips like they been sucked dry." Sergeant Miller cursed under his breath and ordered the men back to camp. He told them not to spread panic and to keep their focus on the mission, but deep down the unease was growing. None of them had seen an attack like that, not from dogs, not from monkeys, not from any jungle predator they knew. By afternoon, the villagers had stopped speaking to the soldiers entirely. They avoided eye contact, shut themselves indoors, and whispered prayers as the Americans passed. It was clear the villagers believed something evil was hunting, and the soldiers had brought it closer by staying. That night, the squad tried to act normal. They lit a fire, shared rations, and played cards, but no one laughed. Every snap of a twig outside made them jump. Private Harris kept fingering the pouch of salt like it was a good luck charm. He spread some of it in a small circle around his bedroll. The others teased him, but no one stopped him. Deep down, they wished they had done the same. Hours passed, then came the noise again. Click, click, click. The tapping, slow and deliberate, echoed from the tree line. It wasn't random. It sounded like fingers on wood, a rhythm almost like a knock. Sergeant Miller signaled for silence. The men gripped their rifles, eyes darting to the dark. Flutter. The heavy wings beat again, brushing through the trees. This time, it was closer. The men aimed their rifles into the jungle, but the firelight only reached so far. Beyond that was nothing but blackness. Suddenly, a scream tore through the night. It was Harris. The soldiers spun around. Harris had been on the edge of the camp, keeping watch. Now his rifle lay in the dirt, his flashlight rolling away, the beams swinging wildly. Harris himself was gone. The squad scrambled, shouting his name, searching the shadows. Sergeant Miller barked for order, but panic spread faster than discipline. They charged into the trees, their boots crushing leaves, rifles raised. The jungle swallowed their voices. "Over here," someone shouted. They found Harris, 30 yards from the camp, crumpled against a tree. His shirt was ripped open, blood trickling from twin puncture wounds on his neck. His eyes fluttered open, glassy, as though he'd been drained of strength. He whispered something, his lips trembling. It had wings. Then he passed out. The soldiers dragged him back to camp, shaken. The old woman appeared at the edge of the firelight, her face pale as she muttered another warning. The translator Sep's voice cracked as he repeated it. She says, "The Aswang will not stop. Once it chooses prey, it follows until the soul is gone." The men stared at Harris, who now shivered under a blanket, pale and cold despite the tropical heat. His pulse was weak, his skin clammy. Whatever attacked him hadn't just injured him. It had taken something from him, something deeper than blood. The squad argued into the night. Some wanted to leave the village immediately to retreat to safer ground. Others insisted it was still just an animal. That fear was clouding their judgment. Sergeant Miller tried to keep control, but even he looked pale. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he lit another cigarette. The fire burned low. The jungle pressed in around them. Every man kept his rifle close, eyes wide open. None dared to sleep. And from somewhere above, just beyond the reach of their fire, came the faint sound of wings. Harris lay pale on his cot, shivering like he was caught in a blizzard. Though the jungle night was thick with humidity, his eyes would open for a moment, glassy and confused, before rolling back into his head. The men hovered over him, whispering nervously. His pulse was faint, his breathing shallow, and no matter how much water they poured between his lips, it seemed to slide out as if his body couldn't hold it. Private Jenkins crouched close, muttering. He sits not just hurt, something sits wrong with him. Like he sits empty. "Shut up," snapped Corporal Diaz, though his own voice cracked. "It's Sep's shock. That's Sep's all." But none of them believed it. The old woman appeared again at the edge of the firelight, as though the shadows had carried her. Her voice was low, urgent, as she pointed at Harris and spoke in rapid Tagalog. The translator hesitated before finally explaining. "She says, he sets marked now. The Aswang has tasted him. It will come back to finish." The words hung heavy in the air. Sergeant Miller clenched his jaw. "We don't sit deal in fairy tales. We hold the perimeter, we keep our weapons ready. Nothing sits coming through without a fight." But even as he spoke, his eyes flicked toward Harris, and the doubt behind them was clear. Hours dragged by. The jungle around them was unnervingly quiet. No birds, no insects, even the wind seemed to have vanished, leaving only the sound of the men shifting nervously in their places. Then it started again. Click, click, click. The tapping, like fingernails against wood, echoed through the trees. Private Mason gripped his rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. Jenkins whispered, "It sits circling us, playing with us." Then came the flutter, slow, deliberate wing beats, heavy enough to shake the branches above. The men raised their rifles toward the canopy, the firelight casting frantic beams against the treetops. Nothing moved, nothing showed. Harris stirred suddenly, gasping as though drowning, his back arched, his hands clawing at the air. His voice broke through the silence, weak but desperate. "Dawn set, let it take me." Before anyone could calm him, his body convulsed violently, his skin glistening with sweat. His eyes shot open, but they weren't the same. The whites had darkened, clouded, as if shadow had seeped into them. Jenkins recoiled. "Jesus Christ, what sip's happening to him?" The old woman Sip's voice hissed through the translator, trembling lips. "It is inside him. The Aswang feeds not only on blood, but on spirit. He is becoming hollow." The men argued, their fear exploding. Some wanted to put Harris out of his misery, convinced he was cursed. Others shouted that he was still alive, still one of them. Sergeant Miller silenced them with a barked order, but even he was sweating, cigarette trembling between his fingers. Then Harris screamed. It was no human scream. It tore through the night like metal scraping on metal, a shriek that rattled the trees and froze the blood in every man's veins. The fire sputtered as though a wind had passed over it. In the darkness beyond, the sound was answered. A low growl, guttural, ancient, vibrated from the treetops. Then the branches above shuddered as something massive moved. Leaves rained down. The men aimed their rifles, voices cracking as they shouted into the black. "Contact! Up there! Fire!" Gunfire erupted, deafening in the jungle. Silence. Muzzle flashes lit the trees as bullets ripped into the canopy. Splinters flew, leaves shredded. The noise echoed for miles. Then silence again. No thud of a body falling, no cry of pain. Only the sound of wings retreating into the night. The squad reloaded, hands shaking, eyes wild. But when they looked back at Harris, their fear doubled. He was smiling. A thin, twisted grin stretched across his pale face. His lips trembled as though he wasn't in control of the expression, as though something inside him was wearing his skin like a mask. His voice was hoarse, broken, but the words chilled them more than the scream had. "It's such not afraid of your guns." The fire crackled weakly, shadows dancing across the men's terrified faces. No one spoke. For the first time, every man understood that they were not hunting an enemy. They were being hunted. And it had already marked its prey. The squad was unraveling. Sweat slicked every man's face. Despite the cool of the jungle night, the fire burned low, throwing long, nervous shadows across their circle of cots, rifles, and ration boxes stacked into makeshift barricades. Their discipline was cracking, and Miller knew it. He paced the perimeter, rifle slung, boots crunching softly against the undergrowth. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay something strained, brittle. "Stay sharp, double the guard. No one sleeps until daylight. Whatever that thing is, it sits not getting through us." But even as he said it, he glanced at Harris, tied down now with belts and straps ripped from their gear. The young soldier's breathing was shallow and uneven, his body jerking every so often like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. His eyes no longer looked like his own. They glistened, darker than they should, as though something was swimming just behind them. Private Mason couldn't set keep quiet. "We can set keep him here, Sarge. Look at him. He sets already." "Shut it," Diaz snapped. Though his hand trembled on his rifle, the old woman stood a little way from the fire, her face unreadable, her lips moving in a quiet chant. The translator whispered, barely audible, "She steps trying to keep the creature away. But she says it is too late for the one who has been touched." No one asked what that meant. They already knew. Then the jungle stirred. First it was a ripple, branches shaking as though brushed by something large moving just out of sight. Then came the smell, a coppery, rotting stench that drifted in, thick and nauseating, making stomachs twist. Jenkins gagged, "Oh God, what is that?" The old woman answered in a sharp, broken voice. The translator stammered, "It means it sets close." Every man raised his weapon. Fingers twitched on triggers. Hearts hammered. The jungle pressed in, the darkness swallowing the edges of their light, and then it began. A low whistle cut through the air, almost like a bird call, but wrong, too deep, too human. It came from the left, then the right, then behind them, circling, taunting. The men spun, rifles jerking from shadow to shadow, breath ragged. Suddenly Harris convulsed, his back arching so hard the belts nearly tore. He shrieked, a high, piercing cry that wasn't his voice at all. It was the same unearthly sound they had heard echoing from the treetops. The fire flickered violently, smoke billowing into their eyes. Miller shouted, "Hold him down," but Harris's strength was unnatural. He twisted against the straps, foaming at the mouth, his teeth clacking together like an animal's. His veins bulged black against his pale skin. Mason, terrified, raised his rifle, barrel trembling toward Harris's chest. "I can set. He sets gone. He sets not one of us anymore." Diaz shoved the gun down, snarling. "He sits still a soldier. You fire that weapon on him, you answer to me." The shouting only fed the panic. The jungle exploded with sound, branches snapping, wings flapping, that awful clicking rising louder and louder until it was all around them, above them, inside their ears. The men fired into the trees, blind bursts of muzzle flash lighting the canopy. The gunfire tore through the night, but when the smoke cleared, there was no body, no blood, just silence. Then, something hit the barricade. Wood splintered as if an enormous weight had slammed against it. Crates toppled, gear scattered. The men scrambled, firing wildly, screaming over one another. Another strike came, harder this time, sending sparks into the fire. And then they saw it. For just a second, caught in the glow of the fire and the flare of gunfire, the Aswang revealed itself. It crouched low at the edge of the camp, its skin stretched thin over a gaunt frame. Its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that scraped the dirt. Its wings were leathery and jagged, folding and unfolding like knives. Its face, half human, half beast, glistened in the firelight, its mouth yawning wide to show rows of teeth, too sharp, too many. Its eyes locked on them, reflective, hungry, intelligent. The soldiers froze, rifles raised, but hands trembling. None of them pulled the trigger. Not yet, they were too stunned. Then Harris spoke. His voice was calm now, eerily calm, though his body still writhed against the straps. "It wants me. If you give me to it, maybe it still leave you alone." The men stared at him, horrified. His lips twisted into that same unnatural grin. The Aswang stepped closer. The camp erupted in chaos. Harris's voice still echoed in their ears, that calm, unnatural whisper offering himself to the beast. But before anyone could even react, the Aswang lunged. It didn't move like anything natural. One second it was crouched in the shadows. The next it was among them, faster than the eye could follow. The barricade splintered beneath its weight, crates flying as though swatted by a storm. Diaz fired first. The muzzle flashed blinding in the dark. The shot hit. It had to have hit. But the creature barely flinched. It twisted away, its wings snapping open in a gust of foul-smelling air, claws slashing through canvas and rope like paper. "Fall back. Hold the line," Miller bellowed, his voice ragged but commanding. The men scrambled, stumbling over gear, clutching their rifles like lifelines. The Aswang's tongue lashed out, long and slick, wrapping around a lantern. Glass shattered as it yanked the light into its maw, swallowing it whole. Darkness deepened instantly, the fire their only flickering anchor. Jenkins screamed, firing wildly, rounds ripping through the trees. "It's Stet's playing with us. God, it's Stet's playing with us." The old woman's chant rose louder, shriller, as she scattered something from a pouch, salt, ash, bone dust, into the flames. The fire roared higher for an instant, and in that brief flare they saw the creature fully. Its skin glistened as though wet, veins pulsing beneath the surface. Its jaw unhinged far too wide, saliva dangling like webbing as it hissed. The soldiers opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the camp like strobe lightning, tracer rounds streaking through the smoke. Bullets struck the creature, tearing chunks from its hide, but each wound only made it angrier. It moved too fast, weaving between the bursts of light, its claws raking across a tent, collapsing it onto two men who shrieked in terror beneath the canvas. Mason rushed forward, bayonet fixed, adrenaline drowning his fear. With a guttural yell, he plunged the blade into the creature's side. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. Black ichor hissed and steamed as it spilled from the wound. The Aswang shrieked, a piercing sound that split the night. But instead of retreating, it turned on him. Its clawed hand shot out faster than Mason could pull back. It gripped his chest, claws sinking deep, and with a single jerk lifted him off the ground like a child's doll. His scream choked off as blood sprayed the dirt. The creature's jaws opened, descending over him. "Fire! Fire, damn it!" Miller roared, blasting round after round into its torso. Diaz joined, then Jenkins, then every man still standing. The Aswang howled as bullets riddled it, chunks of flesh tearing away. It staggered, dropped Mason's lifeless body, and in one furious beat of its wings, it launched upward into the trees. Silence fell. Smoke drifted. The fire cracked. The men stood, chest heaving, ears ringing, staring at the black canopy above. "Did we kill it?" Jenkins whispered, voice broken. The old woman's answer came like ice. "No." As if to prove her right, a deep rustling began overhead. The trees shuddered, leaves rained down. Then came the sound, the same ticking, that horrific tick-tick-tick that slid through the darkness like dripping water. But this time, there was more than one. The soldiers froze, faces draining of color. Miller's eyes darted across the treetops. Shapes moved up there, shifting between the branches. Red eyes blinked in the dark. Not one, not two, a dozen. "Oh God," Diaz breathed, his hands shaking on the rifle. "There sits more of them." The fire sputtered lower, shadows closing in. The men backed together, a tight knot of trembling figures clutching rifles slick with sweat and blood. Harris writhed on the ground, laughing now, a low, hollow laugh that didn't belong to him. "They sir coming for me," he crooned. Eyes glassy, voice not his own. "And when they sir done, they sir come for you." The jungle exploded. Figures dropped from the trees, wings snapping open with sickening cracks, claws flashing. Gunfire lit the night once more, deafening, desperate. Screams joined it, some human, some not. The Aswang swarmed the camp like shadows made flesh, their hunger unleashed. That's part 5. All 700,000 characters. The first direct battle with the Aswang. They wound it, but quickly realize it's not alone. One soldier is brutally killed. Harris grows more possessed, and the real horror begins, the swarm. Do you want me to take part 6 even darker? With the soldiers running through the jungle as the swarm hunts them down, each step blurring the line between man, beast, and madness. You said, yes, 6. ChatGPT said, all right, let's push into part 6 of Night of the Aswang, US soldiers sipped encounter in the Philippine jungle. This will be around 7,000 characters, darker and more terrifying. The battle has broken, the swarm has arrived, and now the soldiers must flee into the jungle, but the jungle itself becomes a nightmare. Expanded part 6, part 7,000 characters. Gunfire tore through the night, but it was useless. For every Aswang the soldiers hit, 2 more emerged from the tree line, slinking on all fours or dropping from the canopy like spiders. Their red eyes glowed in the dark, blinking in and out of the muzzle flashes. Fall back, Miller shouted, his voice hoarse from smoke and fear, but his command was nearly drowned out by the screams. Men dragged into the shadows, their cries cut off mid-breath, followed by wet, tearing sounds that made the survivors' blood run cold. Diaz grabbed Harris, dragging his twitching body away from the fire. Harris laughed and coughed at once, whispering words no one understood. A guttural chant in a tongue that wasn't English, wasn't Tagalog, wasn't human. "They're here for me and for you," he rasped, grinning through bloodied teeth. "Shut him up," Jenkins snarled, his face white with terror. He raised his rifle as if to smash the butt across Harris's skull, but Miller grabbed his arm. "Leave him, move." They bolted into the jungle. Branches whipped their faces, roots clawed at their boots. The damp earth swallowed their steps. Behind them, the camp fell in seconds. Tents collapsing, fire smothered, supplies shredded. The sound of flapping wings rose into a deafening storm. "Keep moving," Miller urged, forcing the men forward. But no matter how far they ran, the tick-tick-tick followed, clicking through the trees, growing louder, closer. The jungle itself seemed alive. Every shadow between the trees looked like a crouching figure, every rustle like claws scraping bark. Their flashlights flickered weakly, beams trembling in the thick mist that clung to the ground. Jenkins tripped, sprawling in the mud. Diaz yanked him up, but not before something darted past, a blur of wings and claws. Jenkins screamed as 3 gashes opened across his back, blood soaking through his torn uniform. "Keep going," Miller barked, firing blindly into the dark. The crack of gunfire echoed, but when the light faded, there was nothing. Only the forest watching. They stumbled into a small clearing, gasping, hearts hammering. The moon broke through the canopy for a brief moment, silver light spilling across the wet grass. That's when they saw it. Strange carvings etched into the stones around them. Circles, spirals, crude figures with wide mouths and black eyes. Old, ancient. The old woman from the camp had spoken of forbidden places, grounds marked by spirits. This was one of them. Bad place, Harris muttered, his voice shifting, deepening. His eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. His mouth moved, but the words didn't belong to him. "You bring them here. You bring them home." Diaz slapped him hard. "Snap out of it." But Harris only laughed again, hollow and broken. The tick-tick-tick returned, circling the clearing. It echoed from every direction, the sound of claws on bark, of tongues slapping lips. Shadows darted just beyond the moonlight, dozens of them, their eyes glowing like coals. Then silence. The soldiers froze, breaths caught in their throats. Even the jungle insects had gone quiet. A shriek split the night, high-pitched, inhuman, ripping through their ears like shattered glass. The swarm burst from the trees, wings unfurling like sails, claws extended. The men fired, rifles cracked, tracers sliced through the mist. One Aswang fell, its body writhing in the grass, but 3 more took its place. Diaz unloaded his magazine until it clicked empty, then swung the rifle like a club, smashing it across a snarling face. Jenkins went down next. A creature slammed into him, teeth sinking deep into his throat. He gurgled, kicking weakly, before the shadows swallowed him whole. His scream hung in the air, then stopped. "Run!" Miller roared, shoving Diaz forward. He fired his last rounds into the swarm, buying precious seconds. The survivors plunged deeper into the jungle. Branches tore at their skin. Mud pulled at their boots. Harris stumbled, dragging his feet, his muttering growing louder, clearer. "They come for blood. They come for the unborn. They come for the heart." Miller shoved him along, but the truth gnawed at all of them. Harris wasn't just broken, he was connected to them somehow, tied to the Aswang. The clicking grew louder again. Closer. The forest ahead opened into a riverbank. The current rushed black and fast under the moonlight. Across the water, the trees loomed even darker, but it was their only chance. "We cross," Miller barked. Diaz shook his head. "We don't know what sips in there. We know what sips behind us," Miller snapped. Without another word, they plunged into the freezing current. The water dragged at their limbs, pulling them downstream. They kicked and thrashed, fighting to stay afloat as their rifles and gear weighed them down. Behind them, the shrieks rose again. The Aswang perched on the tree line. Their wings spread wide. Then they dove, swooping low over the river, claws reaching. One snatched a soldier midstream, yanking him into the air with a scream before tearing him apart above the water. The spray fell like rain on the survivors as they swam harder, lungs burning. Miller shoved Harris forward, dragging him through the water. Diaz gasped, barely keeping his head above the surface. They clawed their way to the opposite bank, collapsing in the mud, choking and shivering. The clicking had stopped. For now, but they knew the swarm wasn't gone. The jungle was theirs. The soldiers had merely survived another night, and dawn was still hours away. The jungle was eerily still. No birds, no insects, no movement, only the faint drip of water from the leaves, the hiss of the river fading behind them, and the ragged breaths of the soldiers who remained. Miller wiped the mud from his face, his hands trembling. Beside him, Diaz sat hunched. His rifle clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Harris knelt in the dirt between them, rocking back and forth, whispering to himself in that guttural, unnatural tongue. "We can keep dragging him," Diaz muttered, voice cracking. "He sits dead weight, worse than dead weight. He sits calling them." Miller shook his head. "We leave no man behind." "No man, yes," Diaz snapped. "But this isn't set the man anymore." As if in answer, Harris lifted his head. His eyes gleamed silver in the moonlight, his pupils stretched thin and vertical like a predator's. His grin was too wide, splitting his face in a way that made Miller's stomach knot. "They, sir, close," Harris whispered. His voice wasn't set, his anymore, too deep, layered like 2 voices speaking at once. "They, sir, always close. They smell you." Diaz raised his rifle, aiming at Harris Sepp's skull. His hands shook, sweat dripping from his brow. "We end this now before he brings them right down on us." "Stand down," Miller barked, but the words sounded hollow, even to him. The jungle answered with a soft sound, tick, tick, tick. Slow, deliberate. It came from above, from the treetops, then another click, then another. The soldiers looked up. Dozens of eyes glowed in the branches, staring down, silent, waiting. Miller's gut twisted. They weren't attacking. They were circling, hurting them. Harris rose to his feet, swaying. His body twitched, his hands spasming as if invisible strings pulled him upright. His mouth opened in a terrible smile. "They don't want you," he hissed. "They want me?" His chest heaved, bones cracking audibly under his skin. His back arched unnaturally, tendons snapping as his arms stretched longer than they should. His spine rippled, bulging under the thin fabric of his uniform. Diaz stumbled back, muttering prayers, "Holy Mother of God." Harris's voice became a growl, distorted and hollow. "They sep been waiting for me. I sep the door, and you brought me here." The soldiers froze as his transformation spread. His nails blackened, sharpening into claws. His mouth split wider, jaw cracking, rows of jagged teeth jutting forward like broken glass. His skin darkened, veins crawling beneath the surface, pulsing with black blood. The Aswang in the trees began to stir, their wings rustling in unison like dry leaves. They shrieked in chorus, a sound so loud it rattled the bones in the soldiers' chests. Diaz fired. The bullet tore through Harris's shoulder, but Harris didn't flinch. He only laughed, a sound so inhuman it made Miller's stomach churn. "You can't kill what's already dead," Harris hissed, advancing. Miller raised his rifle, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim. Harris lunged, his clawed hands swiping through the air. Miller dove aside, the claws missing his throat by inches. Diaz screamed, unloading his magazine into Harris's chest. Bullets ripped through flesh and bone, blood spraying. But Harris kept moving, staggering forward, his grin growing wider. The Aswang shrieked louder, leaping from the trees. They didn't attack, they circled, watching, waiting. Miller realized the truth. They weren't here to kill Harris. They were here to crown him. Harris dropped to his knees, convulsing. His body shook violently, veins bulging, black ichor spilling from his mouth. His eyes glowed like lanterns in the night. The ground trembled beneath them, the air heavy with the stink of rot and iron. Diaz grabbed Miller's Sip's arm, pulling him back. "We have to run now." But Miller didn't move. He couldn't tear his eyes away. Harris arched his back, letting out a roar that wasn't human. His voice echoed through the jungle, carried by the trees, the water, the earth itself. The Aswangs screeched in response. Bowing low, their wings spread in reverence. He wasn't Harris anymore. He was something else, something older. And the soldiers were trapped in his awakening. Diaz fired one last desperate burst into the swarm, then turned and ran into the jungle. Miller hesitated, torn between duty and survival. The oath of a soldier whispered in his mind, "Leave no man behind." But what stood before him was in set demand. As the swarm closed in, Miller bolted after Diaz, the forest swallowing them whole. Behind him, Harris's laughter echoed, inhuman and triumphant, a sound that promised the nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. The jungle swallowed them whole, branches tore at their uniforms, vines clutched their boots like grasping hands, and the thick air burned in their lungs with every step. Miller and Diaz stumbled forward, driven by terror more than direction. Behind them, the shriek still carried, the sound of wings tearing through the night sky. They didn't look back. They couldn't set. "Keep moving," Diaz hissed, his voice raw, breaking with panic. His boots splashed through a shallow stream, mud sucking at his feet. Miller followed, his rifle slamming against his back with every step. His mind reeled, replaying Harris's laughter, the way it seemed to echo inside his skull, as if Harris was still with them, whispering in the dark. The forest thinned for a moment, opening into a clearing where the moon cast pale light across the ground. They collapsed against a fallen log, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling. Diaz clutched his rosary, his lips moving fast in prayer. Miller's hands shook so violently he could barely reload his weapon. "Did you see it?" Diaz finally choked out. His wide eyes darted to Miller. "Tell me I sip, not crazy. Tell me that wasn't sit, real." Miller wanted to say something comforting, to call it exhaustion, madness, hallucination. But the memory of Harris's twisted body, his glowing eyes, and the swarm bowing to him was carved into his mind like stone. "It was real," Miller whispered. His voice cracked. "God help us. It was real." The trees creaked overhead. A low rustle swept across the canopy, then silence. Too much silence. Miller raised his rifle, scanning the tree line. Every shadow seemed to move, every branch a claw, every glimmer of moonlight a watching eye. Diaz grabbed his arm. We can stop. We have to make it back to camp. If we make it there, if we warn them. Warn them about what? Miller snapped, his voice rising. That one of our own turned into that the jungle is crawling with monsters that don't die when you shoot them. No one going to believe us. Diaz Sepp's face twisted with desperation. Then what? We do nothing? Pretend it didn't happen? You saw Harris, you saw what he became. They still come for the rest of us, for everyone. Before Miller could respond, the forest groaned. A deep vibration rolled through the ground, rattling the log beneath them. It was followed by a sound neither of them would ever forget, Harris's voice. But it wasn't Harris anymore. It was deeper, layered, echoing from every direction at once. You can run. Miller froze, his throat went dry. You brought me here, the voice continued, thick with rage and hunger. Now you still feed them. The jungle exploded with movement. Shadows swooped through the trees, wings snapping branches, claws scraping bark. The Aswang shrieked, their chorus so loud it made Miller's ears bleed. Move! Diaz screamed, yanking Miller to his feet. They sprinted into the undergrowth, dodging branches, crashing through vines. Behind them, the swarm closed in, their eyes glowing like lanterns in the night. They ran blindly. Their only thought survival. The trees thinned again, revealing the faint outline of man-made shapes. Sandbags, wire fencing, a watchtower, the outpost, salvation. Diaz Sepp's voice broke with relief. We made it. Oh, thank God. Something dark slammed into him from above, a blur of wings and claws. Diaz was lifted screaming into the air, his rifle clattering to the ground. His cries were cut short by a wet tearing sound, followed by silence. Miller skidded to a stop, frozen in horror. Blood rained down from the branches, spattering across his face. He staggered back, choking on bile. Then he saw him. Harris stepped into the clearing, or what was left of him. His body had fully changed now, towering, hunched, his arms long and clawed. His skin stretched tight and black as tar. His mouth was a cavern of jagged teeth, his eyes glowing white like fire. The remnants of his uniform clung to his warped frame, a grotesque reminder of what he once was. The swarm circled behind him, silent, obedient, waiting for their master's command. Miller raised his rifle, his hands shaking. He knew it wouldn't matter. Bullets wouldn't stop this. Nothing would. But he couldn't just die kneeling. Harris grinned, rows of teeth glinting in the moonlight. Brother, he hissed, his voice a chorus of demons. Come home. The swarm lunged. Miller screamed and fired into the dark, the muzzle flashes lighting up twisted faces, wings, and claws. He didn't stop, not even when he felt them slam into him, tearing his body apart. His last breath was swallowed by their shrieks. His last thought, Harris's twisted smile. By dawn, the outpost was silent. When reinforcements arrived days later, they found nothing. No Miller, no Diaz, no Harris, just shredded equipment, torn boots, and dark stains on the earth that refused to wash away. The jungle had swallowed them whole, along with their story. But in nearby villages, whispers grew, of soldiers who entered the trees and never came back, of winged creatures that prowled the night, led by one with eyes like fire and teeth like broken glass. They called him by many names. The villagers knew the truth. Harris hadn't died. He had become something worse. The Aswang had a new king, and he was hungry.